Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 4 of Crave Arts Presents The Future of Film, featuring intimate interviews with the best emerging filmmakers from around the world. My name is Tom Oliva, and I am co-founder and executive director of Crave Arts and the All-American High School Film Festival, dedicated to discovering, showcasing, and uniting the next generation of visual storytellers and content creators. In October of 2022, we celebrated our 10th annual festival. 10 years in, and our community is thriving, a testament to the power of believing in the arts and the emerging artists that share their stories with us. The collective spirit of our organization, our community, and all of our year-round initiatives is rooted in a shared passion. A passion to breathe life into stories, to collaborate with others who share your vision, and to create content at the highest level. Content with the ability to move viewers emotionally, to inspire with unprecedented style and craft, and to impact real change. Some quick updates from the All-American Bulletin Board as we gear up for our 11th annual festival in New York City this October. The fest will be in New York this October, and submissions are currently open on Film Freeway with the final deadline of July 3rd. You can head over to hsfilmfest.com to get the latest news and updates about the festival, including our 2022 highlight reel, downloadable 2023 budget guide and planning guides, and festival posters, because it's never too early to begin planning your All-American adventure. A friendly reminder that we're offering a new custom category this year, your chance to make an original music video for one of 4 songs by AWOL Records artist MXM Tune. You can head on over to hsfilmfest.com/custom-categories for more info on that. Also, if you plan on attending the festival in New York City, we highly recommend competing in our film invitational competitions, the world's premier on-site student filmmaking competitions in New York City. All right, let's get into today's guest. One of my favorite anecdotes ever shared by a teacher reflecting on a student film production was about today's guest. Alumni from 2016 to 2019, Christian Arnsparger. And yes, that is 4 years of submissions. When I told his film teacher, Clay Combs from James Clemens High School in Madison, Alabama, that I was using Christian's impactful PSA Bunker as a staple of my roadshow presentations, Mr. Combs was delighted and happily recalled the thorough production process involved in bringing this film to life. Bunker addresses the negative effects of domestic violence on children via an extended metaphor. First, introducing an injured and terrified soldier hiding out in an underground bunker, fumbling in the darkness for his bullets, before gaining the courage to surface and fulfill his obligation to continue fighting. The sequence alone would make a compelling short, but what truly elevates the concept is the shift no one sees coming. We abruptly transition to a modern-day house and a husband berating his wife to the point of abuse. The perspective shifts again, and a terrified little boy peers out from underneath the tablecloth of the dining room table as text appears on screen to reveal a devastating final blow. Some of the toughest battles are fought at home. Stop domestic violence. It's a terrific concept with a lasting impact, but it wouldn't resonate nearly as well in the hands of a lesser filmmaker. Christian took pains to ensure the accuracy of the World War I bunker setting, utilizing minimal resources to maximum effectiveness. The soldier is completely believable in performance, wardrobe, and props, and the scene is propelled by the natural light of a single match, provoking engagement while illuminating just enough of the horrifying ordeal. The tone is further enhanced by excellent sound design and staging. We hear the bombs raining down outside as the bunker rattles and shakes on the verge of collapse. And yet, all of this cumulative authenticity is actually the result of diligent, resourceful production. The low lighting helping to disguise the fact that we are actually in an underground tornado shelter, and the soldier's tattered, filthy appearance, the result of Christian encouraging his actor to get into character by rolling around in a nearby drainage ditch. This is the epitome of smart student filmmaking, and it helped earn Christian the award for Best PSA in 2018. For the record, he has also had official selections in all 4 of his years of eligibility, including several nominations. I am thrilled to report, and definitely not surprised, that Christian has continued to pursue his passion. Since graduating from Savannah College of Art and Design, he has refined his skills and shifted his focus to motion design and animation, working on independent projects as well as legit commercial work, including the Army-Navy game, Spiderman No Way Home, and NFL Thursday Night Football, to name a few. Christian already had the right stuff in high school, and he is making the most of his passion and talent. Without further ado, after that very lengthy intro, well-deserved, of course, I am honored to be joined by Christian Arnsparger today. Hey, Christian, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for that introduction. Very flattering.
Oh, well, it's well-deserved praise. I love that story Mr. Combs shared with me, and I want to hear it from your perspective as well. But first, we're going to kick things off with a little segment we call Personal Portrait. In this quick reply exercise, I'll say a word, and you say the first thing that comes to mind. Or I might ask a question as well. Ready to go?
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. You can only eat one food for the rest of your life. What is it?
Probably pizza, however unhealthy that may be in the long term.
You can't go wrong, though. I mean, there's good nutrients, vitamins, cheese,
put
make
some
your bones
bell
strong.
peppers on there, maybe
Okay.
mushrooms.
There you go. Excellent. Okay, next up, choose one famous person from history you want on your team during a zombie apocalypse.
Oh, zombie apocalypse, probably like someone who can get down the fight. Like, who is that? Who's that? Like Roman slave revolt guy?
Oh, like the gladiator guy.
Yeah, I can't remember his name, but him. I feel like he could do pretty well. Or maybe someone with like a gun, maybe
Spartacus. Maybe
Spartacus, yeah, or like a World War II soldier or Vietnam with like a bunch of machine guns or something that might prove useful.
Perfect. Well, something to think about. I don't know where I get these questions, but thank you for at least being game for it.
Of course.
Are you more productive morning or night?
Typically morning.
Okay. I always think of like editor, animator types being like night people, but that's good to know. Which talent would you most like to have?
Out of anything?
Anything.
Maybe something music related. I like to play music, but I don't think I quite have the natural talent. So maybe something interesting, like I could just like shred a harmonica or something. Just kind of weird.
Very cool. Shifting gears a little bit here. Film school.
Useful, but not necessary.
Networking.
Very important, as long as you don't get in your head too much about it. Just think of it like meeting people and making friends.
Perfect. The most important thing a film can do is?
Make people think critically and emotionally about, like who they are and people around them, maybe.
Favorite place in the world?
Probably like northern Italy, southern France.
You cannot go wrong. And finally, the All-American High School Film Festival.
Very, very crucial to, I think, my like growth as a filmmaker, and I think it just pushes anyone to be better every year.
I appreciate that. I certainly hope, we help people elevate their craft and work hard at what they love to do. All right, so let's dive deep now into all things Christian, the filmmaker, the motion designer, all these new things that you're doing. Where are you currently, and what are you up to as it relates to film?
So I'm living in Los Angeles right now, and I've shifted to motion design, which is kind of complicated to explain if no one has any idea, but it's sort of a big mix of graphic design and animation, some film and advertising aspects, visual effects maybe. But yeah, a lot of commercial advertising work, film and TV titles, stuff like that.
So you've shifted from Alabama to Los Angeles. That's quite a big change.
A little bit. Yeah.
How has that gone for you?
It's gone really well. I love it out here. Obviously, there's a big cultural difference between the two, and I talk to anyone back in Alabama, and they're like, "You're in Los Angeles. Like, what's out there? Why are you out there?" But I love it. People are very nice out here, and I like the kind of culture and kind of vibe of the place. It feels a little laid back and a little more relaxed than I imagine New York would be. I haven't lived in New York, but been there enough to know it's a lot more fast paced. And the weather's perfect for the most part. Plenty of things to do outside, inside. Going great.
Very cool. I couldn't be happier for you. And obviously, a big part of you being in LA, I would imagine, is related to work opportunities, right?
Yeah. Everything is, for the most part, a lot of people are still working remotely in at least the kind of part of the industry I'm in. But a lot of the studios that I've been working with are out here and, had nowhere else to go. So figured might as well move to LA and kind of be around those people. And I mean, it's definitely proved useful. I still, for the most part, just work in my bedroom. But I've gotten a lot of opportunities to kind of go out to some kind of studio parties. I worked with like a studio that got some Emmys nominations, and they threw like a little Emmys party. So I got to go and kind of meet everyone that I'd been working with. So yeah, it's proven useful, even if I'm not like in an office all the time.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, it is kind of independent work to a large degree anyway, but it's always nice to have opportunities to be around other people and to celebrate your work. Are you freelancing? Do you work for a specific company? What's the deal with how you get these projects?
Freelancing full time, and just kind of have developed like a pretty good relationship with at least a couple studios and some that I'm trying to cultivate a better relationship with. But yeah, it's freelance. A lot of the projects last a good bit. Like most of the projects recently have been 2-3 months at a time. So it's like pretty stable once you kind of get onto a project. But there's always that sneaking feeling as a project is ending and you don't have something else. And you're like, I really hope something comes up. But to me, I've begun to trust that things do come up. And if you have enough studios that keep you in mind, they'll always be reaching out. Hey, Christian, like, what's your availability starting tomorrow? And I'm like, I'm free. And they're like, all right, let's do it. And then I'm starting on a new project. So.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I mean, and especially, when you're young, it's not like, you have a family, like you can be a little bit more bold about, not necessarily having everything lined up and hoping that it works out. And I have no doubt, based on seeing your work, that, one job's just going to keep leading to the next. Can you tell me a little bit about like, for example, what would a project be that you would work on for a few months for a studio?
So yeah, you mentioned this project in the intro, but this kind of last big project that I was working on last fall was for NFL's Thursday Night Football on Amazon Prime. And we were basically designing, animating the opening title for Thursday Night Football, which is something I guess that hasn't really been done before, at least like we did it, which I loved. I thought it was and I mean, all credit to creative director and people who were doing this before I got on the project, but I thought it was a really interesting, creative and conceptual process for it. It was something that I had never seen anything done in football. I mean, it's sort of like anime, like all kind of 2D illustrated characters, like running through kind of abstract scenes, and there's some football paraphernalia and jerseys.
Yeah, very like edgy, hard edges. And
yeah, right. It's like very graphic and illustrative, which I thought was really interesting. Usually I think football and it's like just kind of crazy, like hyper realistic 3D renders, and it's like dun dun dun, like crazy music and stuff. But this, like, the music changed every week. Like they had like Lizzo one week and like Bruce Springsteen, like all sorts of stuff. So yeah, that is a pretty exciting project, like compared to some stuff I do, but in a sense that could be a pretty kind of typical type of thing that I would do.
How many people are working on that? You know, obviously you have to turn something around each week. So how many people are working behind the scenes to create what we see before the Thursday night football game? Wait, and they're like, what, maybe a minute long, something like that?
Yeah, about minute and a half. Yeah, quite a few people, just because of the nature of freelance, which is what a lot of studios rely on. Like that's kind of their business model, is to keep kind of a core tight knit group of staff artists and then bulk up with freelance staff as projects, you know, come in and out. And it works well both ways. It works well for the studio. I like being freelance. A lot of people like being freelance. So because of that, people's availability can shift. So there's always people kind of cycling in and out on a project. So like I was on the project pretty much the entire time, all the way up until the last day, Thursday, December, 29th or whatever the last Thursday night football game was. But some people would be on it for a week, some people 2 weeks, some people like 3 days. There's some kind of niche roles that people fill. There's like what you call a cell animator, which is sort of like traditional frame by frame animation. So we had like a few of those guys who would come on sometimes for like 2 days just to do like one shot. And that's like the kind of runner throughout the whole sequence. Those are all cell animated and then kind of composited into the whole shot. So at one time, there's probably 5, 6 kind of real workers on it doing the animation or design, and then plus a creative director and a producer.
And what exactly, I find this fascinating because, I mean, I know more about this stuff than most people, I guess, but I'm probably naive. And I think when I see something like that, like it's one person. Maybe he's like someone helps with the idea, and then there's one animator that's doing this. And maybe that's because so many of the terrific animations that we receive are created by one person over a long period of time. Right. So there's this whole team. Like, what is your job within the team? And you seem to be sort of a more consistent piece throughout the entire thing. What are you actually doing?
So yeah, on this project, on the NFL project, I was an animator, a 2D animator completely. So a lot of times projects like that are kind of broken up into phases of kind of pre-production, conceptualization. And that's usually responsibility of the creative director. Maybe there's 2 creative directors. Maybe they'll get like a staff designer to kind of help out with some stuff. But that's kind of pitching the project to at this point, I guess it was to Amazon. They were doing Thursday Night Football, saying, this is the style we want to go with. What do you think? Feedback, improvements. Then once you lock a style, then you move into kind of storyboarding. I mean, honestly, it's like a film in a lot of ways. You move into storyboarding and you draw out, and a lot of times there's a niche storyboard artist that they'll bring on for, a week or 2 and get out all the frames. What's the pacing of the piece going to look like? Put together some sort of animatic, maybe time with some, early music or something that you want it to feel like. Get the pacing, the rhythm, the kind of cinematography of the whole piece together. And then you move into design. So you have just designers designing out 25 frames of, basically just a still of the final piece. What is it going to look like? And then that moves into animation. And that's for this one, I came in to start 2D animating. So taking all these frames. And so there's like, 20, 30 frames, for this piece. And so there's 4 animators or so, and you just kind of split it up, start working. And you're just constantly animating, rendering, sending to creative director, getting notes, continuing to work on that while you work on another shot. They start getting pieced together. There's usually an editor on the project that's putting everything in place. And it's just like constant cycle of like revisions, moving on to the next shot. And then there's like, 3 or 4 other people doing the same thing. And it all comes to a final place at some point.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing I'm thinking of. It's with all these different people working in all these different aspects. It has to get done. I mean, there's a
Yep.
game coming every week, and if it
Yeah.
doesn't get done, there's are you working like for something like this? This is just curious. Are you working like a couple weeks ahead for each one, or is it
Yeah.
is each game different?
Each game is different. They all are completely unique. All the colors in each piece match the home team's colors that week. There's jerseys that reflect both teams' like history, like their star players, like of all time. There's kind of a what we call a superstar shot, where typically it was the quarterback of each team. Sometimes it would be like a star running back, or sometimes even the coach if there maybe like wasn't a star player for the team. So yeah, there's a lot of unique elements to each piece, but there's also kind of one streamlined custom baseline that we created, and that was one of my big responsibilities on the project, was to create this just master toolkit for the whole piece. So aside from those shots that were unique to each week, I had this whole master toolkit with all sorts of like linking and scripting all hooked up to a single layer that you could go in and change. And I had all the teams' colors laid out. And so as soon as I set that up, it became pretty simple to go in, choose the colors, and then those two colors would update throughout the whole piece. So every instance of the home team primary color, home team secondary color, away team secondary, away team primary, those would all like kind of procedurally generate like throughout the whole piece. So that was a huge help. If not, it would have been just a crazy amount of work, but luckily I was able to kind of put that together.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's really fascinating to think about. It's easy to just, there's so much content out there. It's easy to just like sort of be numb to it and not really think about how many people are involved or how many layers there are to things. And you're talking about layers within layers. And again, like I understand it fairly well, but it is really complicated to make even, one of these intros for 1 week that we're all just so accustomed to with everything now. And I think
Yeah,
it's really cool that this has sort of become your thing. And I love that, you're getting paid to do it. And obviously I can
me
just
too.
tell from listening to you that you love doing it. So how old are you now?
22.
All right. So everyone who's listening, Christian is 22, just graduated college. I think we're going to talk about that, but already doing what he loves and getting paid for it. Like, that's amazing. That's what everybody wants. And I guess just in the simplest of terms, without prying, like, are you getting paid fairly well for this stuff?
I am, yeah. I mean, enough to live in Los Angeles without like worrying too much, I guess. I'm not like rich or anything, but
Yeah.
able to yeah, live a life in LA. And yeah, the pay is pretty good, especially as freelance. I'm young. I'm still on like my parents' insurance. I don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. And
Right.
kind of the idea behind freelance rates is they're supposed to kind of pay you, like you get paid more freelance than staff, just because they assume that they're kind of paying you for like assumed vacation time at some point, or like you have to pay for your insurance yourself, stuff like that. So it's a bit more than staff. So I'm able to kind of take advantage of that young and get paid that freelance rate with also not having to pay for insurance and all that.
Yeah. I mean, and the fact that, first of all, that's amazing. So congratulations. I know that you work very hard. It's not like these things are just handed to people. That's not how this industry works, but it's still great. Um, the fact that you're in so young, I mean, I can only imagine where you're going to be in 10 years, right? Where you're going to be in 5 years. If you're already getting these kind of gigs now, you're only going to continue to improve. You're only going to continue to make new connections. So, I mean, I don't think you're going to have to worry about insurance, even when you're not on your parents, I guess is what I'm saying. But to get back to the actual thing that it is that you're doing, I'm super curious. Like, how did you go from making PSAs, and you also submitted some terrific music videos over the years. You also submitted some like horror films. You kind of dabbled in a lot of different narrative styles when you were younger, submitting films to us. How did you go from that to now sort of being this animator, motion design? I still don't really know what motion design is compared to animation, but it sounds cool and it looks even cooler.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess. I mean, we'll probably spend more time, in all of these stages of the progression, but yeah, as a brief overview, went from high school filmmaking to Savannah College of Art and Design. Went in as a film major. Did that for all my freshman year. Was really lucky to get involved on some great like senior thesis films. Pretty young and working in some camera departments and stuff like that. And I mean, I loved it. It was a lot of fun. But like as soon as I started doing it, I was just like, I don't know if I want to do this like as a career. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what it was exactly, but it was like maybe it wasn't stable enough, which that isn't really anything now because my career isn't necessarily stable with freelance. But I just kind of had,
I know what you mean, though. I could see there being a big, yeah.
I
can see there being a difference.
Right. It's a little scary, like going into film, as like anyone listening to this probably agrees. Like it's kind of obviously hard and not very many people end up doing it. So I was just like having maybe second thoughts and I was like, maybe I don't want to do film as a career. And that sort of paired well with me finding out about SCAD's motion media department. And they had this, really incredible course and program called Motion Media Design, which is just specifically geared to what I'm doing now. Like the stuff I'm making now is the kind of stuff I was making in class, all 3.5 years once I got into the program. So,
and you had never really done anything like that in high school.
Nothing.
This was really just like you took this class and you're like, this is it. I love this.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, like right now, I live and breathe and work in After Effects 100% of the time. That's where I live completely now. But in high school, I thought After Effects was like the scariest, most complicated beast like of a program ever. And I remember we submitted, I think my third year, we submitted like a kind of sci-fi-ish film called The Proustian Effect. And we had like one little shot where it was like a kind of weird like science tunnel thing where he's like basically traveling through space and or time or just in his mind. And our friend Elijah was like, I could do that. I know After Effects. And he did. And he like made this little tunnel. And I was like, I thought that was like magic. I had no idea. So that was where I was in high school with After Effects. And yeah, in college, I was like, I'll take this class. It was like a summer class before sophomore year, kind of the intro skills class, learning After Effects. I'll take that, see how I like it. And I loved it. And as soon as I came back in the fall, I had already switched my major and just dove right into motion media. And yeah, one thing after another.
And here you are. That's so cool. And it's just one of those things that makes you wonder, like, what if you had never taken that class? What if it wasn't available, or, for whatever reason you didn't sort of take that leap of faith. And I can imagine there's a lot of people listening who have similar feelings about After Effects. Like it's just this huge, intimidating universe of things beyond, actual developing,
I promise
developing
it's not.
skills
It's possible to learn it. I did.
It's just as practical as anything else, right? It's like you just got to put the time in.
Yeah. And honestly,
there's like anything.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I would recommend filmmakers learn After Effects. I think there's, don't edit in it. I see some people like try to learn it and start editing their films. Don't edit in it. That's not what it's for. But there's a lot of things that it can do much easier than Premiere, if that's what you're in. Things like speed ramping and some subtle animation, even if it's just on clips. If you're doing any sort of like camera tracking, After Effects is much better at that. I think Premiere has like a small function, but it's nothing like After Effects. Stabilization, works much better in After Effects. some color correcting. I mean, now that I'm like all in After Effects, I should find everything easier, honestly. But there's a lot of effects and color correction and that I think are a bit more like clear what they do than just like a Lumetri color in Premiere. But yeah, just learn a little bit, watch some YouTube videos and see where that can like help in your films, because I think it's super helpful.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that. It's a really good insight because I hear that a lot on this show. No matter who I'm talking to, no matter what we're talking about, it always comes back to this sense of like, you should try to learn as much as you can about all the different fields involved in this content creation process, because they're only going to inform the one thing that ends up being your thing, right? So like if you're a director, you should act, because then you're going to understand actors, and vice versa, and all these different things. And that's basically what you're saying is, okay, maybe you're not going to be an After Effects person and that's not going to be your main thing, but even just understanding the capabilities of the program so that then you can work with your editors or your designers or whatever. I think that's really good advice. So why was SCAD the right fit for you? Why did you decide that film school was a good option for you, and why specifically SCAD? I know it's relatively close to where you grew up. That might have something to do with it.
Yeah, I guess that probably had a little bit to do with it. It was never like a huge decision for me. I honestly, like, even though I was like, a high school filmmaker and submitting to All American and all that, I still didn't even think of film school as like a real thing. Like I didn't even know what that meant, like to go to film school, like a school all about film. Which obviously those are real and they're very good. And I have friends who did those and even smaller programs. Like I can't remember what it's called, something in Atlanta where it's like a film technical academy. Things like that seem super useful. And if you just want to go and get hands-on experience, learn, meet people that are in the industry, try to get one of them to, pick you up as a little assistant on a project or PA, and all of a sudden you're meeting people and you're just around films all the time. I think it's like such a valuable thing. But I thought, like, to me, SCAD was like a way to pursue film without it being like, it still kind of felt like a real school, I guess. Like, it was like a 4-year program and there were classes. I had to have like a history credit and an English credit and math. And, I could take, fundamental principles of drawing and design, stuff like that. So it was never like a big option. I was just like, SCAD just seems like, maybe it was like limited knowledge on my part that I just didn't look around enough, but SCAD just seemed like the pretty obvious choice to go and pursue film and still be in like a somewhat normal, college experience in dorms and stuff like that.
And it's such a beautiful school. I went with my family to Savannah. We stopped through there. We were on our way to Florida or something, and we stopped in to check it out. I'd never been there, and you always hear these crazy, wonderful things about it. And it's such a cool city and such a beautiful school. I'm curious about your experience there. Do you feel like going and graduating from SCAD ultimately led to your career path? Do you feel like it was worth it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think I 100% would not be doing what I'm doing now if I had not gone to SCAD. I'm sure I would have been doing something else, hopefully still artistic or creative, but SCAD, like 100%, there was nothing else to it. SCAD led me to my career and what I'm doing now. I didn't even know what this industry was before SCAD, and even at SCAD, like I would see motion media design, in like some like screen in a building where it just like cycles through majors. I was just like, motion media design. I'm like, I don't even know what that is. Like, is that film? Is that video? I have no idea.
Yeah.
And I just was like, all right, let me take a class. And, but yeah, SCAD was an incredible experience. I think even in my freshman year as a film student, hypothetically, if someone's listening and they want to do, film at SCAD or film anywhere, putting myself back in those shoes, it was still a really great way to meet people. And I still like talk to and kind of work with people that I met freshman year as a film student, and they're all doing like amazing things. And there's just so many talented people, and I think that's probably the biggest plus on film school, because I think a lot of all-American people, you're probably already pretty talented, and you probably already know how to make a film and how to set up a light, and you know what ISO is, and you know what shutter speed is, and all this stuff. You know what framing and composition and rule of thirds, those things that you just kind of understand if you're submitting films at a high school level. So you probably won't really learn a lot, at least at first. You will later, for sure. There's a lot more to it, but like your intro film class, you're not really going to learn much technically, but you're going to start to look around and be like, oh, these guys are like me. Like, they're really smart. I should work with them. And there's just so much talent, like in one program, that you learn things from people, they learn from you, and you start putting together teams of like, the best of the best. Like everyone around you is going to be like one of the best high school filmmakers from their city and their school. So you just put all of them together on a team, and I don't know. I learned so much from the people in film classes.
I mean, it sounds awesome, right? Like it makes me want to go back to have that kind of opportunity where it's like, wow, we're all really good. We all want to do the same thing. What happens when we come together?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just such an inspiring place to be. And I'm curious, did you, after you transitioned to more of the design piece, did you work on some of the film majors projects and help in that regard, or were you just doing independent stuff?
Not really. I kind of shifted and was just buckled down on the design. There were some people who did do that, and there was a lot of collaboration across majors. People would make small title sequences or little title reveals for senior thesis films or something like that. I did work on some films even after transitioning to design, but not as like a motion designer, just as like I would grip on like some friends' projects. Even after not being in film, they were just like, hey, can you come help out? And I was like, yeah, because I still loved kind of being on set and being in that environment. So I did that a little bit still. But yeah, for the most part, just kind of buckled into the classes, and there's a lot of projects to do in the motion design coursework. I mean, there's pretty much like for the kind of studio classes, there's 3 projects every class, and they're all pretty intense and sometimes working on multiple at once. So yeah, there's a lot to do there.
I'm glad you said that. Is there a particular assignment or project from college that really stands out to you? I try to like think about our listeners and they're, they're listening to this and they're going, okay, so what's college really like? And you're certainly providing some great insight about that. But is there a particular assignment or something that stands out that just might show us a little bit of what it was like to be you in college? Yeah,
for sure. I'll give 2, which I think kind of both these 2 together, I think fill the gaps in between a lot of the stuff that I was interested in college and kind of has remained true now, and the kinds of things I like to work on. One project was we had to do a motion infographic project. So explaining some concept or thing with design and animation. And that was around the time, not to get political, but that I think Brett Kavanaugh or Amy Coney Barrett was nominated to the Supreme Court. And I thought that was not like the greatest thing. So I developed, and I think I didn't really get too political in terms of like, this is like a bad person or a bad candidate or whatever. But I think that with that happening, to me, it showed a kind of fault in our system and how our Supreme Court works. So I developed this infographic that I did like a bunch of research, and I found this like great report from like these 2 political science professors, PhD guys, about how we could restructure our Supreme Court. And so I read like their whole document that they wrote and kind of tried to visualize it, and put together like a minute long kind of PSA-ish, but more just kind of like Vox style, if you're familiar with that kind of work, just like explaining how could the United States restructure their Supreme Court. And I thought that was really exciting. I've always been super interested in politics and history and stuff. So that was a great way to kind of combine my interests into like a kind of career, like portfolio piece. So that's one. That was like,
that was
like kind of my,
yeah,
go ahead.
Sorry, if I can interrupt. I think what's so cool about that is you're taking, something that you're interested in and you're giving it a power, right? Because you're really, in a sense, you're talking about something that's kind of rather dry and not something maybe, especially young people, right? Who maybe are sitting in a history class being told, well, have you ever thought about how the Supreme Court is structured and how people get elected and blah, blah, blah. But now you're giving it a real power. And that's the beauty of these tools. And what you are developing skills at is you're taking this concept and you're making it interesting. You're making it inviting and engaging. And that is so cool. And to marry your love of design and your love of politics and make a statement, well, that's just great. I mean, that's how you fall in love with an art form like this. Very cool. I do want to hear about the other one. I'm sorry. I wanted to add that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you don't have to be interested in politics. You could be interested in whatever you want and still merge, any interest. I mean, people did that with, music or film or anime. Like, people did everything. Things were so open-ended in a lot of those projects. It was a very loose constraint of something to achieve. Like this was, this wasn't like explain a political thing. It was create a motion infographic. And so just like explain anything you want. Like people explain like, I don't know, the life cycle.
It could have been the NFL football thing.
Yeah, exactly. As long as it fulfills that requirement, and that it helps a lot because these kind of pitches and concept decks are what you use like in the real career, where it's like, this is the pitch. This is what we're accomplishing. This is what we have so far. Like, how can you push it further? So yeah, super helpful. But yeah, the other project that I was going to mention was a title sequence that we did. I think it was just do a main title sequence. And so I did a kind of speculative main title for the show Mr. Robot, which surprisingly didn't have any title sequence. They just had they had the very famous like classic Mr. Robot, like the full frame text that just like slaps on the screen at like a very distinguished shot. And supposedly like all those shots are reflective of like the episode in its entirety. So it's kind of interesting, but they didn't have a real title sequence. So I developed this like what I thought was this kind of crazy, interesting visual language of digging into the concept of the show, which is, if you're not familiar, this like kind of crazy, kind of Black Mirror-esque in a way show about what if there are people behind the curtains working, in the banking and financial industry and really ruling the world. And there's a hacker that's the main character. And he's hacking into their databases and stuff like that. So all these kind of like iconography of the show, it's money, it's computer science, it's computers and hacking, ones and zeros, dollar bills. He's in New York City. So obviously there's like great New York City iconography with the skyline and all that kind of stuff. So just combining I already had a good visual thing going, like, all right, I need to feature all this stuff. But how do you make it weird and like kind of retro sci-fi? So it's like this kind of dark black and red, color palette and weird kind of visual glitching going on. Obviously like still referencing this whole kind of computer thing. But yeah, that was like just this amazingly open-ended project guide, and it's like do anything. I was watching Mr. Robot at the time. I love the show. I understand the kind of concept and iconography within it, and just like go for it.
It's so cool that you get to, obviously it's a school assignment, but I saw it on your website and it's awesome. And I promise you, I will never watch a show intro again without thinking of you, because
yes.
I just put myself in your shoes, and I think you had a little something. Oh, it's insane. And again, it's just another one of these things with so much content that I don't see the human behind, or the humans, the crew working to create these things when I watch them. And yet they're a part of our everyday lives now. I mean, everybody is watching these shows. Everybody is seeing these things over and over again, and they're gripping. I mean, it's like, I can't, as soon as I saw your iRobot, is it Mr. Robot?
Mr. Robot, yeah.
I immediately thought of the House of Cards intro, which for whatever reason will always like be stuck in my mind because it's so powerful with the song and just the imagery. Yeah. And then of course, you know, there's one for everything. And it must have been so much fun to take a show that you liked and to create this for it. And then to have it turn out so well. Is this your niche moving forward? Is this sort of what you see maybe working on, at least for now, like these intro type things? Or is it just like, it's not that black and white? There's just so much work in this area that it could go any direction.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. There is a lot of work. And sometimes like I can't be too picky with the projects I work on. You know, a lot of times someone comes to me with a project and I don't have anything else going on. So I'm going to work on it kind of no matter what it is. Unless I really don't like it, then I could just pass. But I do love title design and show main titles for film and TV. That Mr. Robot thing, that was like, I loved working on that. I loved developing the visual language of it and, you know, pushing that forward. The NFL in a lot of ways is that, like, you know, even though it's like for football and sports, it is like a show opener. It is a main title. So that was a lot of fun. And I love that idea of like, okay, how do you use design and animation to tell a bigger story about the show and kind of relate to the show? Like I'm watching the new HBO show, The Last of Us right now, which is incredible, but it also has an amazing main title, which kind of has this like growth and the you know, the disease spreading. And it's this beautiful 3D rendered thing by a studio called Elastic. They did an awesome job. So yeah, I love just the idea of being able to like kind of reflect on the show and the story and the characters and whatever through a kind of abstract way like that. Like, you know, you don't really see the characters, you don't see the story, but you kind of feel it or understand it just in the way that it's rendered, in the cinematography, in the colors, you know, in the pacing, the music, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think you just made me think of like one of my favorite parts, or my favorite part of this whole industry of film, whatever, all these different things, is tone, and just how this visual storytelling can make us feel by combining all of the elements in the right way. And that's what these intros have to have. They have to establish the tone, or that should be the goal, right? To establish the tone visually and mood, and obviously sound, but so that's sort of like, oh, this is my introduction to where we're going to go with the show, and this is going to be sort of the embodiment of the vibe. And that's such a cool thing to be responsible for. I just thought of two things. I do want to get into some of your high school work as well, but I just thought of two things that I probably should have asked before. You mentioned this studio that made the intro for The Last of Us, which I watched episode 2 last night as well.
So awesome.
Is that like, I know, and it's I love the girl's great. Anyway, we could go all into that, but definitely check it out if you're listening and you haven't. Do you want to work for a studio? Is that like the goal, or do you see yourself being independent moving forward?
I think for now, I'd like to stick freelance for as long as I can, and just, you know, obviously work with all these incredible studios. I haven't worked with Elastic, who did The Last of Us, but I would love to. I work a lot with a studio called Imaginary Forces, and that's what I did the NFL thing with. That's what I did Spiderman No Way Home with. And so there's all these incredible studios that, like, it just takes one connection at the studio to jump in and start working on something. Someone remembers you, or, you know, you worked with someone and now they're staff at that studio and they're like, oh, you know, I think Christian, like he does this kind of like 2D grungy kind of thing. We should get him on this project. So yeah, it's just, yeah, I don't think I want to be staff, at least for now. Maybe later, but I don't know. There's sort of a progression of a freelancer where they, you know, you start small with a lower day rate, and then you do some bigger projects and you get a bigger day rate, and then you do bigger projects. And all this time it's with studios. But at some point, and I've done this a little bit, but not on a big scale, at some point you shift from like freelancing with studios to freelancing with kind of direct to client. So you're working directly with a business or company, or even at a bigger scale, a production house like, Fox or CBS or Warner Brothers or whatever. And you're developing content directly with them. And as you can imagine, that like price drastically raises from working with a studio to Warner Brothers or something. So that is certainly one possibility, just growing, and you start doing a bigger project and you get someone else, and like all of a sudden you're like almost your own studio in a way, where you're getting a younger animator designer, and you're like, hey, can you help me out on this project? And then you're paying them their day rate, and the production is paying you yours and theirs, and it just kind of grows from there. So
right.
I think that's probably what I would like to do. That's a long-term thing, but yeah.
It's so exciting that you have all of that ahead of you. And I'm just so excited for you. The only other thing I wanted to ask about sort of that side of things for you is like, how do you get these gigs? I know you said sometimes people come to you. Is there like a platform where you go to like find out certain jobs are available? Or, I mean, how did it even get started that you got picked up on any of this stuff?
Yeah, it really all started in SCAD. I started doing some stuff in college. I did an internship with this advertising agency, and that was a bit different work. It was much more kind of commercial and small, short form kind of advertising content on social, stuff like that. But I was still doing motion design, and that's where I did the Army Navy stuff. That was with this advertising agency. So that kind of got me in a place to do some real like client work, aside from just showing like classwork on my website or portfolio. I think that helped a lot. And then from there, as like my senior year was ending, I just SCAD was fantastic in providing like a way to connect with a lot of studios. We have a event every March called Commotion, where we bring in like representatives from as many studios as possible. Like my senior year, junior year, there's probably, 20, 30 studios all across America and Canada. I think there's one from like Quebec. And they all just come in and they host portfolio reviews. They watch our reels. They judge, like we have like a little awards thing where they judge like the best work in different categories. And it's just like this amazing way to network, I guess you could say, but really just like meet and hang out and talk to like real staff designers at these studios. And, if you're lucky, they remember you and they're like, either they reach out or, usually you follow up with all of them. So that helped me. I met some people from Imaginary Forces out in LA. My senior year, I applied to their internship as I was graduating. Didn't get the first one, but applied for the next one and got in the fall. And that just like completely opened the door for working with Imaginary Forces. And honestly, like that's been kind of a big like catalyst for a lot of my jobs, even at other studios. It's like, someone will reach out and be like, hey, like our creative director, like he saw your work at Imaginary Forces and like he said to reach out to you about this project or whatever. So like, and that could have been any studio. I love working with IF, like all of them are just crazy talented and I've learned so much, but it could have happened at any studio. It's just that one connection, which just like a web, just like spirals out to all sorts of people. And if you're pleasant to work with, then, try to work hard and learn, then like, I think people take notice pretty quickly. And then, yeah, everyone, like they just tell their friends, they're like, oh yeah, this Christian guy, or, Tom, he was really good on this project. You should talk to him.
Right. It's so important how you present yourself, your work ethic, just being kind. You cannot underestimate that, because we all want to work with people that we like and that we like working with.
Exactly.
And it's a combination of your attitude and your talent. And sometimes attitude is more important, to be
Definitely.
honest. But that's such a cool program that they have. I love the title of it too, Commotion. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense for sort of what they're aiming to achieve. But I was thinking the entire time that you were talking about it that I have a feeling that a lot of your success is because of the way that you present yourself, and your humility and your eagerness to work. And I can imagine that you presented yourself extremely well, and that these opportunities arose from that, as well as your talent. And that's going to be a catapult, right? It's just going to be one thing into the next, and your web is just going to continue to grow. But you got to get that first. You got to get that first gig, and then you sort of see what happens from there. And it's really really cool, the trajectory that you're on. So I'm going to shift gears with the little bit amount of time that we have left. You come from Madison, Alabama, one of my favorite programs, James Clemens. I've had the opportunity to visit on several occasions. I think when you were there, I definitely visited. I think and presented the road show, right? Yeah, and I know definitely I know your sister's into this stuff as well. Yeah, I definitely remember her as well. It's not a place that people think of when it comes to filmmaking, and I laugh about that sometimes with your teacher, and the laughter then turns into admiration, because it's amazing that you've managed to build this really successful, top of the line national program in an unlikely place. How did your high school experience and support help get you where you are today? Help you continue on this path?
In every way, I think, like, just as earlier I said that, like, SCAD 100% put me to my career now. Similarly, James Clemens and our program Jets Press and, Clay Combs, that, like, same way. He and that program also, like, 100% set me up to where I'd go next. That set me up to go to SCAD, and SCAD set me up to do what I'm doing now. So it's just this big kind of chain reaction. And yeah, it's incredible what Combs has built, like, at James Clemens. It's like you said, I agree. I think it's the top of the line, film program. I thought that when I was there, and I think they've only grown since. And it's like, when I was there, like, I think me and maybe a couple other people were the only people submitting to All American. And we thought that first year, we thought it was like the coolest thing ever that we got accepted. And I don't think we got a finalist the first year. Maybe we did, but the second year we did it again, and then we were finalists, and we thought that was the coolest thing ever. And then, by the end we won Best PSA and Combs. And it's like, yeah, they just got like 4 finalists and like 2 category winner, just like, they're just doing amazing. Yeah. So yeah, it's crazy what Combs has built and continue to build.
Yeah, and I think it's such a good example of a school district supporting the program, and then having the right teacher whose dedication and passion is really what keeps it alive, and has continued to help it grow. And I'm just super impressed by that. I don't know if Bunker's your favorite film that you made in high school. You have Part-Time Fool was an excellent music video. I think it was definitely right there with the one that won that year. You could have easily won for that. I remember that being an agonizing decision that we had to make, which is probably my least favorite part, because it's like no one knows how close they came, kind of thing. But that was a great film. Bunker, really one of my favorite, if not favorite, PSA we've ever received, just in the sheer creativity and impact that you delivered. And I really wanted to mention during my intro that you did so much with so little. If you really think about what you had to work with there and what you made it seem like. I remember the Proustian effect. I don't know, but I just keep coming back to Bunker because you provided me with such an awesome tool for teaching. And that's why I take that film around. Was I accurate in my description, as I remember Mr. Combs telling me that you had your lead actor like rolling around in a ditch?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. That was Garen Tidwell, who was like one of my best friends growing up, and he started doing theater in high school. And so it was like an easy choice, but he's also like absolutely incredible. And he's in Europe now doing like theater acting. And he's part of like this theater troupe and doing Shakespeare and all sorts of plays, like touring around Europe. So he's got it in him, obviously. Like that was all him. I didn't have anything to do with how good he was. But yeah, I found, it's like a sort of World War II or World War I era bunker and this soldier. And I found all the pieces of the outfit and, the helmet and fake gun and all this stuff. And just worked with him. Like we spent a lot of time like before filming, just like putting him in the costume. And it's like, okay, like what is this emotion? Like, you are terrified, like, you're on a real battlefield. And originally, like we thought that it might be a longer piece and not a PSA. Like it wasn't supposed to be a PSA at first. It was going to be, like a typical like narrative film. And like, and the idea came from Combs, and he had like some old story in college about like, oh, what if like, this a kid who like uses his imagination to like escape like a bad household or bad friends or bullying or sort of like using a kid's imagination. And so Combs and I spent a lot of time like paring down that concept to be what it became. And yeah, everything just kind of lined up and works. Like I agree with you. It's definitely my favorite piece I did in high school. Even though like it's not the longest or like the most, it doesn't have the best like dialogue, because there's like almost no dialogue. It doesn't have, all these things, but I think it was certainly the most emotional and the most impactful in every way. So yeah, I mean, even now, like I'm very proud. That's probably, having hindsight, that's like the one thing that I'm still proud of as like, technically, narratively, emotionally, like even with like years of kind of growth, I'm like, that still works. Like it's still emotional.
Yeah. And I know it can be tough looking back on work you made when you were younger, seeing the flaws and knowing how much you've grown. But I think you're exactly right. And I think I almost feel a little bad, like saying, like, I want to talk about Bunker, right? It's for exactly the reasons you described. It's short and it's a PSA, but then I'm like, no. If something is really good, then it's important to talk about it. And I think if you watch the opening sequence, because it's really sort of two different worlds that you're presenting, that opening sequence with the guy, with the actor and the soldier in the bunker is a lot like the motion work that you're doing now. It's really about setting up tone and making an introduction. We know nothing about it. Like I had to make a guess. Is it World War I or World War II? I didn't really know, but I know it's a period piece and that it's a long time ago because the details are authentic. And I know what the tone is. And that's really all I need to know, because that helps drop the hammer when you transition to the other scene. But it's such a great tool for teaching so many things. And it's all the things that young filmmakers typically get wrong, right? A lack of authenticity. Well, how did you make it authentic? Because we didn't see that much. So we couldn't see the flaws. It was believable because the lighting was so low. And then what we did see, you made sure it was right enough, right? Because I really care only emotionally about what he's going through. So I'm not even worried about the details, but they look good to me. They look real. Down to the wound on his face, like you obviously had a makeup artist do a really good job on. And then the rest is just carried by sound design, right? I mean, it's just like you feel like you're in that bunker and have to go back out, and you don't want to. And then all of a sudden to transition to what it's really about, that there are all kinds of battles in this world, and some are really tough on kids. It was powerful. And I'm glad that you and Mr. Combs, for whatever reason, decided to go down the road to make that film, because I think I'll be using it to teach for a long time.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. We wanted to show the least as possible, because like at least I was very aware of our flaws and lack of budget and talent and all these things. Like I knew that we could do this little bit, but at first, like I said, it was going to be a longer narrative thing, and I was thinking about how do we show him on a battlefield? Like, are there going to be like helicopters and like other soldiers? Like, how are we going to do VFX to like shoot bullets and stuff? And I was just like, all right, there's no need to do that. We can still tell the same story without like kind of showing our hand. Like, hey, we're high school filmmakers. We, don't have a whole VFX team. We don't have like a full costume team. All these things. So it's like, yeah, how can we show as least as possible while still making it clear that he is a World War II soldier and he's badly wounded and he's running from a battlefield. And I think a lot of that came from the acting. Like I thought it was completely believable. I remember filming it and like feeling the emotion while filming. I'm like, man, this guy's like actually terrified of being in here. So yeah, that helped a lot. With a worse actor, I don't think it would have the same effect.
Yeah, and that's another thing. It's all showing and really no telling, and that is power in film. And it's like you were forced to do it, maybe, but whatever it is, it worked. And I think you'd be selling yourself short not to give yourself a lot of the credit too, because you had to come up with this.
Thank you.
You had to figure out how to pull it off. You had to figure out how to get that performance out of that actor. And it really is a terrific little film, and it's definitely worth talking about. So just a couple more questions. I mean, we could keep talking, and I know there's, probably so much more that we could explore. What is your favorite part about what you're doing now? And then following that up, what's the hardest part?
I think probably my favorite part is still the early conceptual pre-production phases, which a lot of the times I'm not a part of on these big projects. Like the NFL project, I had nothing to do with that. I when I joined, the style was locked. The look and visual language was locked. And I still had a great time animating. It was a ton of fun to be on the project. But really like discovering and using reference to build a unique look for something, I think is really interesting, because I mean, a lot of times it's scary, like, starting a project and you have like nothing. And it's like, okay, our assignment, like we're going to do a main title for this film or show. And like, that's all you have. And it's like, okay, where do you even start? And so you just start combing through, references. And I mean, a lot of people are better at this than I am. And I love hearing from other people talk about their pre-production phase. But, I love just like, nothing is off limits in terms of like art and design. Like, right. Some pieces I'm like, looking at like architectural photography and like you said, like in Bunker and what I'm doing, it's all about setting a tone and a mood, and every art form does that. So I think you can find inspiration everywhere. You look at photography and it conveys a mood and tone. You look at visual art, painting, sculpture, interior design, like anything is like all about creating like a certain aesthetic and tone. So it's like, okay, how did they do that with photography, and how can I do that with design? And it's the same with film. It's like, how did they do that with like a sculpture? And it's like, okay, the sculpture, it feels, cinematic. It feels like, maybe the lighting of the photo of the sculpture is like, interesting, out of focus, bokeh, all these things. It's like, how can I use lighting and set design to create like this unique tone and vibe? And that's what I loved about film. And that's what I still love about like a lot of the work that I'm doing.
Very cool. And I couldn't agree more. That people don't always see all the different disciplines as connected in that same way about the aesthetic, but it's absolutely what I see. And it's probably what's going to ultimately give you an edge. And I have a feeling at some point you're going to get your turn as that creative director. And I can't wait because when you did it independently, you excelled. So what about the hardest part?
I mean, in a lot of ways, that part is the hardest part. Because like I said, it's hard to start.
Your favorite part's the hardest part.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. Yeah. Because it's very hard to start with literally nothing, like on the NFL project, I came in and everything was established. And it's like, obviously it's difficult. It's technically challenging to animate things and make things look believable and, have the motion be fluid and interesting. But when everything's there, it's kind of just doing it. And it's like, okay, I know how to animate. I know how to do these things. It's just, at that point, it's just a lot of time and refining and, and there can be a lot of things. One of my favorite things, this is favorite again, but is like, there's like a different way to solve like every problem. And there's a different way to animate like every different thing. So, yeah, I might say that. I'll go back. I'll say favorite in that way, trying to solve kind of the problem of getting something to where you want it to be. Because you can have in your head, like, I want it to look like that. I want it to move and flow and be timed like that. But then you actually have to do it. And there's like infinite ways. I mean, if anyone has gotten into After Effects, you can do the same thing so many different ways, but it's all about finding the easiest or maybe the simplest, sometimes like the most flexible way that can be easily changed later on. Like film, like there's this kind of concept of like destructive or non-destructive editing. Like there's a very similar concept in animation where it's like, okay, how can I build something to then change it later if my creative director doesn't like it or the client doesn't like it? How do I easily change the color or movement or whatever?
I think it's so cool that the challenges of the process are something that you embrace, and it just shows how much you love what you're doing. And I mean, that's all anyone can ask for in this world, and it's just
Definitely.
so cool. And you're so well deserving that it makes me very happy to know that you found happiness in your career.
Thank you.
Because so many people just don't ever know what that feels like.
Yep.
And I know what it feels like. So, it's always great to know someone else who has found it. What advice do you have for our community? Someone's listening, they're out there, I don't know, maybe they already know they want to do motion design. I think you probably wouldn't be surprised, but people might be surprised how many young people that are part of our community already know, like, this is what I'm going to do and how. And I know that changed for you, but in any way related to the industry, if you're talking to your younger self, what advice would you have?
Yeah, definitely keep an open mind to anything. As I've talked about, like I had no idea the things that I'm doing now, I didn't even know existed, when I was in high school or even starting college. So keep an open mind about the kinds of jobs and things that are out there. I think, and I hope to be like a good example of someone who also doesn't know what motion design is, or, and there's a dozen other and more different fields, tangential or within film and video content, that you will never see until you just like kind of, I don't know, fall into it a little bit. Like film isn't some crazy, like impossible thing to do. It's very real. So many people live it and work it all over the world. So like, don't be scared to pursue it. But also don't be locked in. Don't think like, okay, I'm going to be a cinematographer. I'm going to be a film director. Maybe you will be, and work towards it if that's what you really want to do. But also don't be afraid to kind of, as you pursue that, look to left and right and be like, oh, maybe I actually want to be, an audio engineer in music production, or like, maybe I want to do like YouTube social media content or something for brands. Like small brands need like film content to show off their new skateboard, or, like there's just so much to do. And don't lock yourself into anything until never. Just like, I'm still not locked in. Like, who knows what I'll do in 5 years. Right. And also just
I love it.
Be motivated and be passionate and interested in what you're doing. Be nice to those around you. I think that's been one of my like biggest bonuses is, like, I don't think I'm the most like technically savvy and talented person, like doing what I'm doing, but I think like I try to be pleasant to work with and eager to learn and willing to help out, like even when it's not expected. And that's what people remember more than like, oh, Christian did this like crazy 3D render or whatever. Like they might remember that, but they're going to remember like what it felt like to work with you. And it's like, oh, it was just so easy to be around him. It was so nice to jump on a call every morning. And that's, I think, matters a lot more than technical ability.
Great advice. And look, you're living it, because I certainly feel that way speaking with you today. It's been a real pleasure. The last thing I like to ask folks, and this is a little bit selfish because it gives me some stuff to put on my list, but is there anything on your radar right now, recommendation for a film, a TV show, music release, can be anything at all that you're digging that will just help give us a little bit more insight into what you're all about?
I mentioned The Last of Us. I'm loving that. It's an incredible. I never even played the video game, but the show is fantastic. The title design, that's what I'm really interested in, is super good. So yeah, go for that.
Do you have since you mentioned the title design, do you have another show or something that, like, from a person who's in the industry really working on it, you're like, wow, that one actually really blew me away?
Recently,
I'm sure you have 20, but
yeah, there's so many that I love. I'll do recent and then like kind of past. One recent one I think was last year. A show I think it was on Apple called Candy. That had a really nice title sequence. Kind of interesting, like right up my alley, like very 2D, kind of interesting textural, illustrative, but not, character. So that's really nice. I don't know about the show. I didn't really watch much of the show, but I loved the title sequence. And then historical, I've always loved. It was like the kind of old Sherlock Holmes movie with Robert Downey Jr. I think it was the first one that has a awesome title sequence. It's like this kind of worn like newspaper and like ink reveals, and it kind of pans over newspapers, and then there's like a photo of like Sherlock Holmes, and then like pushes in, and it's suddenly like him moving. Great title sequence. Recommend that. And the movie's good too.
Very cool. I'm telling you, I think everyone knows that these things are good, but I will forever look at them more closely now because of the work that you're doing. So I want to thank you, Christian, for an insightful glimpse into your experiences and motivations as a storyteller. I encourage all of you to check out Bunker and Part-Time Fool and all the other links in the description. And of course, thanks to all of you for tuning in and joining us. I remind you that this is just one of many in-depth conversations with the future of film. You can go to hsfilmfest.com for more information on the All-American High School Film Festival. And please be sure to share and subscribe across all of our platforms to help support our community of emerging artists. Christian, thank you so much.
Tom, thank you so much for having me. It's awesome what you guys are doing with the podcast. Of course, with the film festival, that was a huge help to me as an emerging filmmaker. So thank you guys for all that you're doing. It's amazing.
I appreciate that. And you keep doing what you're doing as well. Everyone, see you next time.